Hey, hi. So this channel is called Distance Between Planets, and my name is Mr. Valentine. That is what I'm going by now, and that's what I'm calling the channel right now. Now, I'm here mainly to talk about the planet Eris. That's Eris. That's it. And there's two glyphs, two symbolic representations of the planet that are currently somewhat popular in astrology. This planet is very new to the world of astrology. It was discovered in January 5th, 2005. It's been around right now for over 17 years, but it just hasn't really gotten a whole lot of attention. It hasn't really been treated with the depth and complexity that I believe it has. It is, in my view, a planet that's equally complex and powerful with Pluto. Now, Pluto is a dwarf planet that's out there in the Kuiper Belt. Eris is a dwarf planet out in the Kuiper Belt. These planets are very far away. They're very small, right? They're called dwarves. There are other ones that are out there. There's Haumea, there's Makemake, there's Quaoar, there's Varuna, there's Sedna. There's a bunch of other ones that are out there. But the bulk of the discoveries have occurred in the first decade of the 21st century. That was really the big discovery wave. Took place between about 2000 and 2007 was the last one, called Gong Gong, that was out near where Eris is. So these are trans-Neptunian objects, TNOs is what they're called. And the two that I know the most about, there's Pluto, which everybody knows about, and then there's Eris, and then also Haumea. So I know really a fair bit about Eris at this point. I've studied this planet for quite a while. And I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can work pretty reliably with it in a chart. And I can talk a lot about its impact on the world on a mundane level, meaning its broader impact in terms of political events and economic shifts, all kinds of cultural layers that have come down to us from this discovery. I think the discovery of Eris in 2005 was a major, major turning point in terms of global hegemony. Now, we're right now starting to really overtly and obviously feel the effects of that. This is 2022, and there's currently a war going on in Ukraine, and there's lots of different thoughts and feelings and ways of people have been depicting this event and looking at it. But I think it is really at the heart of a momentous hegemonic shift that is going away basically from the planet Pluto and towards the planet Eris. I'm going to show you how I spell this. Here it is, Eris, E-R-I-S. And then there's these two glyphs here. These are two different ways of representing the planet. I really like the one that's over here. Sorry, it's a little hard for me to see what I'm doing because it's not a mirror image. I really like this one. I don't really like this one very much. Now, the one on the left for you is basically, it's like the Mars symbol turned upside down. And I think it's a commentary on Eris's relationship to war. Now, as I've studied Eris, I do not really think it has a very profound relationship to war. I think it has somewhat of a relationship, but the planet itself is really not about fighting, and it's not interested in creating wars in general. I have not seen it that way. What I see it doing more than anything is maintaining and setting the energy for transformative, sort of ongoing, changing views of the social contract. I think Eris is about sharing. That is the main way that it operates. If you could think of Pluto as being a planet that's really about a very, very intense implosion that can lead to an explosion like the Big Bang, but it's very, very, very extremely intense concentrations of power in one place. And I see Eris as basically extreme concentrations of power in two equal places. But it's a subjective thing. So when you talk about self versus other, right, from where you stand, there's an even balance between yourself and everybody else. But in reality, objectively, that's not really true. There's you, which is like this infinitely tiny little morsel of awareness in the universe. And then there's everyone else, which is dwarfing you absolutely fantastically. So Eris is really about developing an awareness of others and the perception of others and how you may be seen by those other people. That's a sharing process. And anybody who uses social media is familiar with that. Now we can get deeper and deeper and deeper into the way Eris works. Tonight's video is really meant to be very, very short for a lot of reasons. Technically, I'm barely maintaining here. I've got some really nice lights that are helping me, but they're battery operated and they're going to go away really soon. So I can't just freewheel it and keep wrapping, right? So I'm saying that the tendency of people so far has been to use this glyph over here more than this one. And I think that's a big mistake. I think people should really be paying attention to this glyph, which comes from the Discordian Society. The Discordian Society is a group who've been worshiping Eris. They're sort of halfway between serious and a joke. That's serious, S-E-R-I-O-U-S, not S-I-R-I-U-S. And they're have a very complicated and weird and sort of nonsensical ethos. But the naming of the planet actually came from the Discordian Society. And that's my contention. And I can get most of the way towards proving that, even though I can't all the way prove it, because that would mean that the discoverer, Michael Brown, would have to admit that he fully did that. And he can't really do that. So I'm digressing. There's all these little tiny areas of fascinating trivia connected to Eris that don't really get discussed. But it's a really, really fun planet. The sharing process is, I think, a wonderful thing. I think Eris rules Libra. This is a big deal. So when a planet has a rulership, it's really, really important. We're going to eventually end up with 12 separate ruling planets. Right now, officially, I guess we've got 10. And then there's two planets that rule 2 signs each. So we've got Venus ruling Taurus and Libra, and we've got Mercury ruling Gemini and Virgo. And I believe that Eris rules Libra, and I think there's a ruler for Virgo, which is out further in the Kuiper belt and has not been discovered yet. I don't think it will be discovered within our lifetime, but I think within the next century, it probably will be discovered. And that will be the ruling planet for Virgo. But right now we're in the space of Eris holding the global hegemony as the furthest out discovered planet with rulership. So this is a really interesting time. Now, the turning point, I believe, was actually with the discovery, which is a long time ago now. That's 17 years back. So we can look at how much the world's changed in 17 years. Well, the biggest thing, which I think has happened, is that the United States is no longer the world's dominant hegemon. It's not holding world hegemony. It does not have that imperial rulership that it had up to about 2005. Now, we've maintained the appearance of it, and there's sort of a clinging and hanging on to the paradigms that existed before then, say between about more or less about 1930 to 2005. Now, that was the time of Pluto's rulership. And now we're in the time of the Eris rulership. Eris is about sharing. It's about understanding yourself as perceived by others. Understanding yourself as perceived by others starts to lead to tribal affiliations where like-minded people associate with each other, or people with similar backgrounds associate with each other. And within those groups, they form common conceptions of the good. And so there are ethical examinations that occur within that Iridian field. That means the field which is governed by Eris. Now, I spell it with an E-R-I-D-I-A-N, and I got that directly from Wikipedia, that they said that the adjectival form of Eris is Iridian. So I'm going to use that word a lot on this channel as I talk, and there may be people who really don't like it. And I will say, you're welcome to use whatever word you want. I'm just trying to find a term so I can get on with things. And I found that one, which was validated by the people at Wikipedia. Regardless of what you think about Wikipedia, they are just so dominant in the field of research that it just behooves a person to go with the flow very often, unless you see information that directly contradicts your conscience or your, what you know. So I like this word Iridian. I like it, and I'm going to use it. So within this Iridian field, ethics is a really important thing. We can think of the planet Pluto, which is about, in my mind, experiences that sort of transcend ethics, where Pluto is very often saying you have to have something and it doesn't matter how you get it. It just, the ethical part of it is completely thrown out. And I think this is very, very helpful when people are working within the field of self-help and inward directed therapeutic practices, focusing directly on the self. Then that is a really, really, really good thing, that you can operate without any kind of hangups, because one person operating alone does not really have to be concerned with ethics. But Eris is very much about recognizing the importance of other people. And that immediately brings ethical matters to the fore, right? You've got one person living alone on an island with nobody else. That person can do anything that they want. There is really no more moral reality to that person's life. But as soon as another entity enters the picture, those two people have to negotiate a concept of morality between them in order to coexist. So Eris is very much about this process. And I'm going to be getting into looking at charts and studying them in depth here with you. And we'll talk about famous people throughout history. We'll talk about what's happening politically and economically right now. And it's going to be really fascinating. I'm going to dig in as hard as I possibly can. And I do a lot of writing, but what I find is my writing, it just takes me too long to write. So if I waited to be done with this writing before I actually shared it with people, it would just be ridiculous. And if I'm writing about something which is reflected in social media, Eris really rules social media. That's my opinion. And I can back it up pretty well that I might as well use social media to talk about a planet that rules social media. Now, as a footnote in this first video here, I will also talk about the planet Haumea. Haumea is a planet which I don't think has rulership. It's orbiting close to Pluto's orbit. It has a 284-year orbit, whereas Pluto has a 248-year orbit. So they're relatively close together, even though they're very far out in space and they're really small objects. So they're in no danger of crashing into each other. They really, really have a lot of room to move out there. But the orbital periods are somewhat similar. It does not have a harmonic relationship with the other planets, that the ones that are officially recognized, where Neptune is the furthest out. So Pluto has a harmonic resonance with Neptune, and Eris also does. Eris has an orbit of either 559 or 560 years. I think that the astronomers have gone back and forth between 557, 558, 559. I saw 560 once. Then I think the bidding kind of went back down to 559, but it's pretty far out there. We happened to discover Eris when it was 100, more or almost 100 AUs away from the sun. So that's each AU, right, astronomical unit. That's the distance of Earth to the sun. So it's almost 100 times the distance from Earth to the sun. So where we are right now in relation to the sun, we can multiply that by 100 and we'd be pretty close. We'd overshoot just very slightly to Eris's furthest point away from the sun, which is called an aphelion, Aphelion. So Eris gets way out there, and then at its perihelion, when it's at the closest point to the sun in its orbit, it's a little bit inside of where the orbit of Pluto is. They have some very, very elongated, stretched out orbits. Okay, I'm gonna stop before getting into all the details of this stuff. I'm gonna go back to Haumea. I get lost when I'm talking because I like to be extemporaneous, meaning you just kind of go off the dome and see what happens. But I want to stay close to the basics right now. So we're talking about Eris, which is a planet that rules Libra and that really is in essence about a sharing process and a recognition of other people. Now we're also going to talk about Haumea, which is a planet that does not have rulership. It's a very, very strange planet that's sort of football shaped with rings around it and a couple of moons and a collisional body, meaning it has a sort of set of its own sort of meteoric bodies that chase it around as it orbits the sun. But it's really, really far out there, slightly further out than Pluto most of the time. And this planet is really about showing humanity that we are not always the center of the story. It's really the transhumanist planet in one sense, although it's much more going on than that. It's really about life itself on Earth. It's about the life impulse and sometimes, the creative destruction also that has to occur for life to come forward. Haumea is a Hawaiian fertility goddess, and she was able to sprout things like through parthenogenesis. She could birth objects, birth beings from her body in different places, and she could also get pregnant traditionally. So that's the stepping off point for our understanding of the planet. Now, the planet itself is very different from the mythological name. The mythological name just opens the door, right? So Eris, as a goddess, was a goddess of strife and chaos and war. And that really does not get us into understanding the planet of Eris. What we really have to do to understand Eris is we have to go back to the only sort of myth that has survived from the classical era, from Greece, that could show us what Eris was about. And that involves Eris delivering the golden apple of discord at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, which is the thing that kind of led eventually to the Trojan War. That is really the stepping off point for understanding Eris, is that one incident. And I will expand into that, and we'll be able to learn a great deal here that's very, very useful on a practical level. For those of you who want to use this planet in your astrological work, you'll be able to learn about it here and use it in a reliable way. And hopefully Haumea too, although Haumea is a real tricky planet because it's so very much about the material world and the actual physical process of life. And it sort of just does its thing, and then the human being reckons with what's happening, but it doesn't really have a rulership that puts it in the same bracket. It's a little bit I've found it to be a little bit like the opposite of Chiron, because Chiron allows you to introspect and see where you're damaged, and then make yourself sort of the most important thing in your universe. And you focus all your healing energy on yourself, and you transform yourself, and you sort of gain by losing, right? You get hurt, then you recover, and then you're stronger than you were before, and you share that information with people. So Haumea is very much about sort of telling you individually that you may not necessarily be that important in the bigger picture, that we're just little pieces of this puzzle, right? And that Haumea is going to bring life into the universe through you. It's going to give birth to you, give you life, and it's also going to give birth through you. And it will eventually destroy you in order to keep life going on the planet, right? We all eventually return to the mulch. Anyway, I love Eris very much. Eris is kind of my favorite thing ever that I've ever come upon, discovered. Personally, my own personal discovery of it, not meaning I discovered the planet, obviously, but my own personal journey learning about this planet has been one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. Aside from personal relationships and things like that, which transcend intellectual knowledge, is just a very small part of life. But within the realm of intellectual pursuits, it's been one of the most joyous and interesting things I've had happen in my life, and my life has been it's been pretty interesting actually so far. Anyway, I want to thank you for listening. If you come here and stuck with it, you would know because you'd be here hearing me say it, right? Okay, thank you very much, and I'm going to say